Alright, hey, what's going on guys? Bladesmoss here. So this video is something new on the channel because I have recently come to the shocking realization that nobody cares about my opinion. So in order to continue to live in my own personal fantasy, I'm going to pretend like my opinion actually matters by supplying it to the entire internet. They say talk about what you know, and I know very little, so it'll have to be video games. So in this series, I intend to review every single game in my Steam library in alphabetical order. Today's game is ArcheAge. Now, to provide some context on ArcheAge, I did play it during the beta, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Everyone had donation perks because they'd donated to get into the beta, and since downloading it on Steam, I've put another 100 so hours into the game. Not a ton of time, and I never really get far into the late game, but I do have some history. As the time of this review being recorded, ArcheAge is currently in version 2.9 Ascension. ArcheAge is a quote-unquote free-to-play game that feels very pay-to-win, with some very major features being locked behind their patron system. But games cost money, I get that. But with boosts for the crafting and the in-game labor system and the unique land ownership feature all being locked behind this patron system, it feels more like the base game is a free trial rather than free-to-play. But that's enough about that. We need to actually talk about the game, right? As for the character creation, when you first create your character in the world of ArcheAge, the first choice you make is your race. You can pick one of the two races from one of the two factions for a total of 4 options. On the continent of Newia, we have the Newians, a generic human race, or the Elves, humans, but with pointy ears that can swim fast. Aerodynamics, I guess? The Fearins, which are probably the most aesthetically interesting, that look more like cats than they do people, and the Harani, a slightly smaller race of generic humans. Each race feels extremely generic to human races, very human-looking elves. The cat people, I do have to admit, do stand out quite a bit. The bonuses each race get feel very negligible, and I didn't really notice them, no matter how much I played each race. You can watch a fully voice-acted cutscene for each of the races to get their history and background while creating, or while choosing, I guess. The appearance editor is greatly detailed, highly accurate, even allowing you to move around the pre-made face scars and, like, rotate their position. And anyway, with dozens of sliders for just about everything, I found myself just a tad bit overwhelmed. Then you get to choose your name and a starting skill set from one of 6. That skill set will then combine with your later 2 choices that determines your class. And that brings us to the next section, classes. The class system in ArcheAge is rather unique. Your class, in air quotes, is determined by the combination of skill trees that you chose. And these aren't permanent. They can be changed or switched out, and they level individually. Or I guess that's proficiency. The whole system, it's very confusing. Your skill trees level up individually from each other, and each skill tree unlocks new abilities as it levels up, right? So you can't just switch a skill tree that you've never used and get all the best abilities, you know? The fluidity of this system is nice, but I often found myself using the same 2 combinations to fit whatever role I was trying to play, with a third being just random one I picked. But that may just be my own playstyle. Speaking of playstyle, let's move on into combat. The combat feels very quick and action-oriented, even though I found it hard to miss a lot of the abilities. It felt as though the order I used them in was actually very important due to their combo system, even though I never actually understood the combo system in itself, as it really isn't explained very much. There's a nod to it in the beginning, talks about how it works, but I'd prefer to know the math or whatever, but that's just nitpicking, I guess. PvP was intense and exciting no matter when I played it, although the PvE side, I did start to use the same combos over and over, unless I was fighting, say, a world boss or in an instanced dungeon with a party where I needed to react to them and fill in gaps. And moving on to lore. The game offers quite a bit of story and lore through several fully voice-acted cutscenes and animations, and while these are immersive, the just text that we get throughout the majority of the game it feels extremely uninteresting, and I often find myself ignoring it entirely, even for the quests designated as story. It just, with MMOs, I'm so burnt out on just reading pages of text to try and understand what's actually going on. As for visuals, the game uses CryEngine 3, and while its textures may not be perfect for that particular engine, it's nothing jaw-dropping like we've seen that CryEngine can do. I think that the bright colors and just great contrast they have fits the lighter aspects of their fantasy genre, but making some of the more creepy mobs look more vivid and utterly terrifying. Some of them are really disgusting. The tutorial, I know it doesn't really matter. You're not going to do it more than once, but the tutorial is fully voice acted. It's even custom animated in a few cutscenes where your player model is in a little cutscene. It's adorable, but it feels a bit bland when compared to other games that are fully voice acted. Star Wars: The Old Republic. Quests. As stated in the lore section, most of the quests are bland and generic. Most that I come across seem to be collect X number of items, kill X number of monsters, or in the odd case, kill X number of monsters to collect X number of items. With the turn-ins almost always being report to an NPC if the quest does not finish automatically. It got highly repetitive doing quests over and over. Towards the later levels, I found that some of them started to branch out. Like there was one where I had to kill X number of monsters to collect X number of items to make a thing, just craft something. However, their complete early mechanic does offer a slight reprieve, allowing you to turn in a quest before fully completing all of the objectives. Crafting and labor points, to be exact. Most actions in the world of ArcheAge, such as opening the little coin purses that mobs drop, or identifying unknown loot, or even crafting new objects, they cost labor points, which generate naturally, albeit a bit faster if you have their donation status, or can be refilled instantly with potions that are pretty hard to get if you don't have their donation status. I found that as a patron, I rarely used up all my labor points unless I was seriously grinding through crafting to get a really high-tier piece of gear or building a large-scale structure like a boat. As for the crafting system, it's rather in-depth and interesting, if not at times confusing, with each different crafting specialty having its own skill level. Everything from carpentry to alchemy, cooking, and metalworking. The system always had something new to show me, even if I didn't always understand. Land ownership. The land ownership system allows players to own their own piece of the in-game world, whether it's for a cosmetically decorated player home or a large farm for gathering materials. The implemented tax system that requires players to craft an item for free, not counting the high labor point cost. You can actually drain your labor points entirely relatively quickly, just crafting their tax certificates. These are required to pay and keep the spot. It ensures that inactive players are not allowed to just keep the land forever, and allows new players to eventually get a spot, provided they are vigilant. I've also noticed that a real estate market arose where players would sell land to each other for in-game currency, which is rather interesting. On the same note as the land ownership brings us to the boat system. Boats are placeable structures. When you first build them, they have to be placed in some sort of a dry dock, I guess, and the materials have to be brought to them and interacted with as if you were building a house, the same way. But once you're done, the boat drops out of dry dock, and then it is summonable with a scroll, and it functions similarly to a mount, although it's very similar to a structure in that it has the same kind of health as a structure, and it can be damaged. They're customizable with cannons and sails, and you can replace items for different items, get better sails, better cannons, etc. Moving on. Pets, mounts, and gliders. Most mounts in the game can be rode by 2 people, which, while fun, means that at times a stranger may hop on your mount, forcing you to click the passenger dismount button. And similar to pets in the game, mounts have their own unique abilities which can be used in combat and various other situations. The glider system is rather unique. The glider system allows players to craft, buy, find, etc. their own glider to fly around the in-game world. It certainly adds a new perspective and gives a unique option for travel. Certain gliders have better hang time, better speed, etc. Some allow for rolls or lifts with what I assume is some sort of explosive device because they go bang and they shoot up into the sky. Moving on to our final point, conclusion. At the end of the day, ArcheAge is a Korean-made MMO that they tried to refit to a Western audience, and at times it does work well, but at other times it certainly feels like a grind. The lore is interesting, but it does not offer much substance between cutscenes, and at the higher levels don't really feel worth it unless you can put in insane amounts of hours or buy the patron status. Overall, I think it's a decent game and certainly stands out from other games brought to us from Tryon Worlds Rift. It's certainly not terrible by any means. However, I found that it just was not worth the time cost to play the game at a decent level if you did not have the patron status. This combined with their donation packs that give you anything from temporary pets and the ability to check your mailbox anywhere, it certainly felt like the game was pay to win at times. With their Apex system, you can directly purchase in-game currency, an item that can be redeemed for credits in their cosmetic shop or sold on the auction house for in-game currency. It certainly felt like pay to win the higher levels I got as more things got grindy. It always felt as if, yeah, I could play for 6 hours or drop $60. Overall, I'd give the game 7.5, that being half a point off for the unimmersive lore and 1 point off for feeling pay to win. The grind system, combat system, it may not be my own personal taste, but there is an audience for that. However, I don't think that a game should try and make a story if they're not going to try and make a story. I also think that a game should either be pay to play or not be at all. Free to play brings up too many chances for microtransactions that eventually end up being pay to win. And when you pay to play, then everybody's happy. Subscriptions, you can still sell cosmetic items, and you make your overheads. But that's just what I think. If you disagree, there's a little comment section down below the video where you're provided with an infinite number of characters to tell me what a jerk I am. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate a like, maybe a subscribe. If you didn't enjoy the video, I'd really appreciate you just completely telling me off in the comments. I live for that. Thank you all for watching. I'm Bladesmoss. I'm still Bladesmoss, and I will be Bladesmoss tomorrow. Bye!